All right, well, I might go ahead and get started just because I do have a lot to cover that I want to go over with you today. So if people can come in, feel free to get more food if you want. And just another heads up, I will be recording this too. So you'll have some information about the session after the fact. I'm going to be providing a bunch of different resources that I cover today, some stuff that I won't have a chance to cover. So keep an eye out for that. I'll send out some additional communication about where that's going to land. So first of all, thank you all for showing up. I'm excited to keep some AI literacy and competency programming alive for you all. I think that's a pretty important thing to be able to provide to our community. It's a pretty big topic these days, and I just got back from Chicago, actually. I went to the ABA Tech Show that this was front and center, from hearing from judges panels, from practicing lawyers. Of course, we had people talking from the software company, so there was a little bit of salesmanship and showmanship coming from that side of things too. So I figured I would just talk quickly about a couple high-level themes that I saw throughout that, and then we'll get into the topic of today. Two other quick housekeeping things. All of the images you'll see in this presentation, unless I tell you otherwise, are also AI generated. I always think it's fun to create a bunch of assets and just show people kind of the breadth and creativity that some of these tools have, just in case you're not aware of those kinds of things. And also, I want to introduce myself too, because that might be helpful to know. So my name's Kyle Fidalgo. I'm the academic technologist here at BC Law, part of the technology support team here. My focus is mainly on academic and educational technology. So helping faculty learn how to use different technology tools in the classroom, in their teaching, stuff like that. The software administration and education side of that, as well as just bringing to the forefront key technologies that are upcoming that they should be aware of. So you can imagine I've had my focus pretty firmly squared on artificial intelligence the past couple of years. As soon as it was released, ChatGPT released in November of 2020-22, I immediately saw this as a pretty game-changing technology, and it's proving to be that way, and it's only advancing more and more. I mean, these companies that are creating these AI models, and I'll shore up some terminology here in a second, but advances in this field are happening at 4 to 6 months, sometimes faster. Releases are happening literally on a weekly basis for certain things. So it's a lot to keep on top of, and this is just one step in that path to attempting to keep you all informed too, because it's going to be very important, not only for learning processes, but then also your professional careers as well. It was very clear from going to this conference that this is going to be an important thing for you all to get a grasp on. So a common refrain from a lot of the workshops that I went to, there was a lot of learning tracks, and every single one had at least one, if not multiple, AI sessions involved, was that the question's no longer if you're going to be using this in practice, it's how are you going to use it ethically and effectively to improve the outcomes for your clients? How are you going to use it to increase access to justice for people that might not otherwise have it? How are you going to use it so you're not winding up on the front page of the news in negative ways, like hallucinations with citing cases or making up facts from materials that you're presenting to the court, stuff like that. So again, this is just one piece of that puzzle. Because of the time limitations, we're not going to be able to go super deep or learn everything today, but that's not the point. It's just to get some of this in front of you so you can start to wrap your head around it. There was another big piece, a call to action to increase your competency in this area. And I'll leave, again, some resources at the end of this presentation, but a lot of, there's one judges panel that I sat in on, and they just referred to the fact that we already have pretty strict professional and ethical guidelines for the legal practice, set forth in the model rules. And also there was a formal opinion from the ABA last fall, Formal Opinion 512, that tied some of the AI issues to some of those model rules that talked about technological competence and stuff like that. So their wording was just we think you should be using these tools. You need to understand sort of where they fit into your practice. Sometimes there's going to be places where it shouldn't fit in. You just need to be aware of like all of the different issues at play. So that was something that came up quite a bit. And again, it's great. You're all here. This is like part of that. So congrats. You're doing the right thing. So for today, we're going to be talking more, like my background is not in legal, first of all. So you'll have to bear with me on some of these examples, and I might ask for your help for like terminology and stuff. I did have 1 or 2 examples vetted by some of our legal librarians, just so I don't look like a complete fool when I bring up legal examples. But my argument is that like if you can get some of the first principles understanding, like the core foundational knowledge of these tools, you could take that and then apply it safely and effectively to whatever task that you're trying to do, right? Like LLMs, their bread and butter is taking in text, manipulating it, and outputting text for the most part. And a lot of your work as a legal professional, you deal with a lot of text. You also, there's a lot of like reasoning and judgment and like human value that you have to like assess along the way too. And there are different times that you're going to lean on tools like LLMs to help you in that process as well. So today's focus is really on like prompting mechanics, prompt engineering, communicating with AI tools. So I want to give you some high-level things to think about while you're working with them. And just so you know, like again, getting like terminology and stuff in place. LLMs, chat assistants, chatbots, all of these things are basically referring to like the generative AI tools that are available today. Things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, so on and so forth. So what I want to do really quickly, I sort of did this a second ago, but I want to get a quick temperature of the room. I think it's important to do like a quick AI overview, just how they work, core level. So that way you can understand a little bit more about like when you do talk and work with these tools in a collaborative way, why it might be outputting certain things, or when you need to ask it certain types of questions, or when you need to be the one supplying the context to ground the conversation in like factual, accurate information versus letting it do its job of like ideating and brainstorming and coming up with things on its own. So I said this before, but let's just see a show of hands here. Like, who uses generative AI tools? Okay. And would you say, like, keep your hands raised, like weekly basis? Daily basis? Many times a day? Okay. That's good. That's totally fine. People are going to be like in different areas on their like pathway to literacy with these tools. Would anybody feel comfortable, like, do you have a grasp of like how these things work, sort of like at a high level? Would you say you would feel comfortable like explaining that to anyone? No? Okay, that's good. So this will also help inform like how much time I'm about to spend on this, which it's still gonna be quick, but don't worry, I'm gonna leave you with resources to like dive deeper to learn more. So, generative AI tools, we're talking ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, these like general knowledge AI assistants. Foundationally and fundamentally, they are probabilistic models. They work by predicting the next word in a sequence, next token in a sequence, and you can just equate a token to a word based on all the patterns that they've learned in their training data. And these predictions are also informed by all the words that they've predicted in the sequence that came before. So really quickly, just to unpack that, the way that LLMs work, large language models, it's all the foundational technology that works with these tools. Each time they predict a word in a sequence, they're taking into account like all the different words that they've generated before. And the generated is like a key term here. They're not going off and looking to a database, they're not doing search, they're not pulling something from like factual information. You can think of it more as like recall. So like, let's say you were talking to like an author, they wrote a book 30 years ago, and you wanted to know about like a specific chapter in the book. They're probably gonna have like a general direction and idea of like what they were talking about, but they might not remember all the specifics. They might make up some information, they might hallucinate, right? But if you gave them the chapter of that book, had them reread it so that they refresh their memory, and then you ask them about it, chances are it's gonna be a lot more of an accurate response to you. That's very similar to how large language models work. If you just ask like a general question and ask it to do recall from all the training data that it's seen, it'll probably do a pretty good job. If it's seen it a lot in the training data, you could probably expect it to be almost like 100%. But if it's a little more of an esoteric type question, it might make some things up along the way. But if you provide that information to it ahead of time that you know you want it to answer or ask questions about, it's going to do a much better job for you. So that's kind of like one way to think about how these tools work. The fancy machine learning way to say this is that large language models are auto-regressive next token predictors. But that one sentence basically encapsulates everything I just said, how they're just predicting one word at a time based off of like all the words that they've predicted before, and that's informed by the training process that they go through. So just to touch on the training piece of it, there's both a pre and a post training process that these tools go through. So you've probably heard like ChatGPT. The GPT part of that word is generative pre-trained transformers. So the pre-training phase, just to talk about this a little bit, we've got our little cat friend here. He's going into the gym, ready to get trained up. What happens here is this is when these tools see basically like all the publicly available data on the internet. So this is a massive amount of training data. It's on the order of like tens of trillions of words. And this is how these language models learn about the human language. They're not programmed explicitly to like output in certain ways. The algorithms that underlie these tools, they actually teach themselves like the semantic meaning between words, the relationships, how words fit together in a sequence, and stuff like that. And they do that with this like huge amount of data. Some of these companies now are using like higher quality proprietary data, stuff like that as well through different licensing agreements. But you can just imagine it as like all the publicly available data on the web. And so what happens in the pre-training phase, what comes out on the other end is something called a base model. And this is effectively just like a very fancy autocomplete of the internet is how you can think about it. So here's a little interactive piece. All of you probably have a smartphone on you, correct? All right, so what I want you to do, take out your phone, fire up like a text app of some kind, and I want you to type in AI is, and then use just the first prediction, that middle button, and just keep completing the sentence until it forms a coherent sentence. And then I want to hear from a couple of you what you came up with. I'll do the same thing. All right, I got a pretty funny one fired up. So I did it a couple times, and it says, AI is the best thing to ever exist, and it will never get better. Anybody else want to share? Will they? Yeah.
AI is the future, and we need more people in this world who are ready and able and able and able.
Yes. Yeah. Uncoherent, right? Like sometimes that'll happen. Yeah.
AI is the most annoying thing to me.
All right. Fair enough. Some people think that for sure. Yeah, so next word prediction. That's like a very simple form, but what comes out on the other end from the AI side of things is much more complex, much more capable, but it's still just fundamentally like predicting the next word based off the patterns it's learned. Where it actually becomes these helpful chat assistants is in the post-training phase. So has anyone heard of this term before? Cool. You don't need to know any of this stuff to like use these things effectively, but it is kind of nice to understand some of them. But reinforcement learning with human feedback, this is just a post-training method that you have expert humans in the loop that are reviewing conversations, or maybe even creating and labeling conversations as good or bad. And then that additional information gets fed back into the model so that it understands how to behave like your friendly, helpful chat assistants that we're working with today. So without this, you could like type in the beginning of a Wikipedia article and it would just complete the whole thing verbatim. With the post-training phase, this is how we're able to like give it instructions to follow. We can give it a role to play. We can ask it to like assess and analyze different documents, load up a document and have a conversation back and forth with it and ask questions. So we've got Copilot, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Anthropic's Claude. All of these are like, you go to the website, there's a blank input, now what, right? Like, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to work with this? That's what's the whole point of this talk, is the rest of that. So I had ChatGPT create this image for me. You might notice like the text on this guy's shirt after he's been to the gym for a little bit. But if you were to type this into like one of these chat tools, you're gonna get a much more coherent response out on the other side. I think you've all like experimented with that. So anyway, if any of this like isn't making sense, or you just want to learn a little bit more about like some of the foundational stuff, I've also built this website partnership also with AI to help with some of the coding pieces of it. But this is like a self-guided journey to learn all of the ins and outs. It gives you like a safe place to also like experiment, try out some different tools that maybe you don't have a chance to check out. And it also has like mini lessons and stuff sprinkled throughout the entire, throughout all the different modules that you'll have access to. I recommend just, it takes like 5 to 20 minutes per activity. Do like one a day, you'll be done in about a month. And you'll be in the top like 99% of your class, and probably practicing lawyers right now. I could say that pretty confidently, just based off of like conversations I've had both last week at the tech show and just anecdotally here at the law school. So today we're talking all about effective communication and collaboration. So like I said, you don't have to know all the nitty-gritty ins and outs necessarily of how they work under the hood, just those high-level concepts. It's generating text, one word at a time, based off of the patterns it's learned in its training data, and the predictions get updated each time based off of all the prior words that it's already generated. So it's important to keep that in mind. When you start working with these tools, you realize really quickly it's all about effective communication, becoming a good collaborator, a good communicator. Like if you can articulate the points that you want to make, the types of things you're trying to work on, understand when to surface certain materials to it at the right time, you're gonna get far better output than you otherwise would. The other thing is, don't overthink it too much. Like, of course, you can just type in a simple query and get a response. The important thing is to know like when to lean on those simple back and forths and when to provide more information. But also like keep an open mindset, keep a mindset of experimentation. That's gonna go a long way. Curiosity, asking good questions, and realizing that it's more of a back and forth than I'm asking one question and getting an amazing output out on the first try. So let's talk about prompting. By the way, ChatGPT just released a new image generation model. It's fantastic, and it does text better than like anything that's come out so far. So this was all generated by ChatGPT, which I think is pretty amazing. Prompting basics. Last week, I've heard like a couple different prompting formats, frameworks, and stuff like that. I used a very simple, just sort of mindset of like role, task, format. I heard one last week that was setting up the goal, your expectations, context, and resources. So I thought that resonated pretty well. We'll go through these really quick. But really simply, again, like I said before, you can just enter in like a prompt, a simple query, and get a decent response back sometimes. But this is another way to provide like a framework to a model that you're working with. So the first thing is a goal, and I'm gonna give you two examples here. So the first is like, let's say I wanted to create some image assets or infographics or something like that for a presentation I'm giving. And this one happens to be on artificial intelligence. So you might think like a goal is just the simple prompt up front. So if you looked at this, like I wanna create an infographic rendition of where LLMs fit into the broader category of AI research. How would you rate this on a scale of like 1 to 10 of a prompt, do you think? There's not really any wrong answer. It could be good in some situations and bad in others. Give it a 6. 6? Yeah. I mean, I could see that. It's one of those, I think it depends answers. Like if you're wanting it to be more exploratory and just seeing what comes back, yeah, I think a 6, it's reasonable. But if you had like an actual outcome that you can see in your mind, like more of a prescriptive vision, then this might be more like closer to like a 2 or 3. So if you just put this into an LLM, maybe it's going to give you what you wanted, maybe not. So this is where providing some additional information comes into play. And I intentionally left one that did not spell the word correctly because this also happens when you're working with AI, right? Like expections, not a word, but that happens sometimes. Like sometimes it's like a funhouse mirror version of like what you're actually expecting to come back. So if, let's say I did want to be a little more particular about the kinds of things coming back, this is where you need to give it more guidelines, rules to follow, a little bit more about the vision that you had. So let's keep it simple. Let's orient it in landscape for a presentation. Imagine it like a visually nested set of categories, so on and so forth. You're just giving it a little more information to help it along its way. On top of this, you can also provide additional context. This is like one of the most loaded terms when you're talking about generative AI, and I also happen to think like context is everything. When you're working with tools and you want to get real meaningful work done, thinking about all the different context that it needs to do the job well for you is super important. So we've got our first things loaded up here, and then you might provide some additional context. So this link just opens up this Google Doc here. But let's say I wanted to paste in some extra information into the chat. So I'm telling it like, all right, here's the broader AI category. Then I want you to talk about machine learning, and then deep learning, and then finally large language models. So this is just extra information that it needs to see. If you've got it in your mind of like, these are the categories I want, you don't want to leave that up to chance. You want to put that in the prompt. And then at the end of the day, what will come out on the other end is probably something that you were hoping for. So this, again, created by ChatGPT. I didn't touch up any of this. The only thing it sort of messed up was like human lang. It just hyphenated that, but it actually got all the text correct. Pretty amazing job, and I think it did the trick here. So again, like the value of high quality context, I cannot stress that enough. And context is also like particular to you. It's very individual, it's very personal. So it could be like, what's important to you in your context? Who are you asking this question? Like, it's gonna give you probably different answers like, hey, I'm a law student, I need help understanding this concept, versus I'm a practicing attorney, or I'm a junior partner, or what have you. Like putting that role information in, putting that extra context is gonna go a long way for you. Here's a couple of different examples of things that count as context. Honestly, the way I feel about it is like outside of the goal, everything else sort of is context at the broader category. It's just more of the specifics of what you're adding to it. So this could be like documents and resources that you're uploading, extra information that you want it to be aware of, stuff like that. Who's the target audience? What level of complexity should this be delivered at? All of that stuff counts as context and helps get you a better result. So another quick tip, this also came from that ABA Tech Show. Another common refrain was, it's up to you to find and review and provide high quality source material to AI. You might be working with some tools like Lexis and Westlaw where they're like going off and doing research and stuff for you. You're still gonna wanna be aware of the materials that it's going and looking at. And you can review that by like the citations. A lot of these tools now have internet search capabilities too. So it's not just relying on its like knowledge recall. It's actually going and pulling source material into the context of the conversation to give you better answers. But you might want to check it. Maybe it's going to like Uncle Joe's like Bayou Law blog or something versus like an actual authoritative source. So you just want to check those things as you're going. So if you provide the correct material up front, it's going to be doing a much better job at answering you. You might just want to be careful, or at the very least, you want to review if it's going off and finding that source material for you in the first place. So another example of how this might play out would be like this scenario. I'm not going to walk through the whole thing necessarily, but just to give you another idea, sort of in like a legal context here. So a firm's client signed a software contract with a developer to deliver a custom CRM system. This is just a customer resource management software. The contract included a clause stating time is of the essence. The dev encountered unexpected hurdles and delivered the system late on March 15th. The client claims losses due to the delay, so on and so forth. They're threatening to sue for a breach of contract. So maybe this is in like a class and you're trying to figure out how to answer this. Maybe you're an intern at a law firm this summer and you've been asked this question to find the legal issues or what are the arguments. So the first part, like maybe you just start off with the basic goal. You want to see just what the AI has in its collective like world knowledge recall. So you could say, analyze this scenario between the client and the developer regarding the late CRM delivery. What are the arguments? Very generic. You're probably going to get a very generic answer back. So how do you level this up? Well, you want to add some expectations. So you might tell it, hey, review the scenario. And then you put in the scenario. And now you say, identify the primary legal arguments the client can make to claim breach of contract. Then identify potential counter-arguments or defenses that the developer could raise. Focus on relevant contract law principles. A little more specificity, you're probably going to get a better answer right out of the gate. If you want to add even more context, this is where like you as the human expert in the loop, or at least someone that has some information about like the direction you want to go, the judgment, the taste, all these things that you're learning in law school, you can actually give it like pointed and specific things you want it to focus on, and it will take that in, and because you've loaded it up at the beginning of the conversation, it's helping inform those predictions as it goes, which then means each new word that it decides on that it's generating, it's probably going to make more sense to you and be more useful to you for the task that you've set out to do. Any questions so far? I've been talking for a while. Following me? Cool. Yeah, feel free. Anytime, like, ask questions. I'm happy to answer them as well. So another tip just for working and collaborating with these tools effectively is to show the tool what you want versus just telling or asking. So what does that mean? Simply just means to give it examples. And when we're talking about, again, like the machine learning and AI space, like what they call this is like shots. So we've got 0 shot, 1 shot, few shot, many shot. All that means is you're just providing examples. And this is really useful in a couple different scenarios. One, if you know that there's like a formulaic type of response that you want to see, you could give it just a simple example of like, hey, I want you to format it with like a paragraph first, followed by a few bullet points, and then expand on that, and maybe tell me the assumptions that you made ahead of time to give me your response. And it will take that and learn within the context of the conversation, and then apply that to all future turns in the conversation, which is super helpful. Another example, I'm just going to use this because I use this quite a bit, but let's say you want to create some assets or images, or just, this could be for fun, this could be for work, whatever, but you want to create some images, but you want it to be more on like the photorealistic side of things. This isn't like a workshop on image prompting, but just one tip. If you want to get higher quality, more realistic images, you can tell it like, use this film stock, or use this particular type of camera. This is the shot. This is like, award-winning nature photography, like something like that. But the terms of art that you use for photography, that could apply to like legal aspects as well. Like you want to load it up with the terminology that's relevant to the task at hand, and it's going to do a better job at giving that. So you could say like, give me 15 ideas for image prompts for like a subject, a location, a particular vibe. I want photorealism, and then use these examples to inform your decision. So example 1 and 2 would be an example of like a 2-shot prompt where you're like, look at these 2 things, all the other examples you provide to me, I want you to follow this format. So the way this plays out, I could just show you quickly the differences here. So I already loaded this up in a chat. We'll do one of each type. All right, so a little like Mad Lib style. Give me a subject and a location. Tariffs, all right. And where are these tariffs being doled out, if I could spell it right? Right, so this is going to give me one version of this. And then if I just gave it like that basic prompt style, like just the goal, hey, give me 15 ideas for image prompts for tariffs related to China, the output's going to be very different, right? So if we go back here, we've got industrial and economic themes, an empty shipping yard and twilight, stacks of red and blue. It's shot on Kodak Ektar 100, which is a type of film stock. Same thing, like portrait of a dock worker in Boston. Hey, there we go, smoking a cigarette during a break. Shot on this particular type of film. Here's the qualities of this film, so on and so forth. And it gives me ideas that are following the examples that I gave it. Whereas here, it's going to be very different, right? There's not going to be those like terms that I wanted it to use to invoke that photorealism. It's just very generic, general. It'll probably work, probably do the job. But if I wanted the specific photo qualities, the first one's going to do a lot better job, right? Same thing goes, like maybe you want to generate an ideate on some like cross-examining questions for a case that you're working on. So you could say like, generate some high quality questions for a witness. You're going to be the one adding the context, the resources, the expectations that are relevant to the thing you're working on. You don't want to just leave that up to chance, right? And then maybe you provide a couple example questions, maybe ones that you know that have worked well for you in the past. The types of question, the types of line of reasoning. Maybe like you even add additional context here of like, hey, I had this case before, here were some of the key facts, here were questions I used that worked well. Mirror your next response to me based off of these shots, yeah.
How important is the formatting, like where you're putting the examples, like how you're structuring them?
Yeah.
Is that standard between tools or for using these chat assistants?
Yes, good question. It wasn't something that I like called out quite yet, but you're probably asking about like the hashtags and like how I've formatted stuff. So that AI Foundations course does talk about this, but real quick, that's just something, it's called Markdown, and it's basically just a way to visually represent formatting in a document. So rather than actually like bolding the text or creating a heading or something, this is something that these tools just natively know because they've also been trained on like a lot of code and stuff like that. But there are some basics to know, like a hashtag designates a heading. A lot of times you want to give it like clear sections so it can differentiate between like your ask and then the different source material that you're providing to it. Again, I wouldn't overthink it too much about like how this plays out in the results of the prompts. The biggest thing is you just want to tell it like, all right, here's like my goal, here's the different types of formatting that I'm hoping for. If you are providing resources, it could just be as simple as like you label it and put a colon and be like, I'm about to paste this here. And you literally tell it like exactly that explicitly, like I'm pasting in this information below, use that as a reference. And then it understands because it's very much like a natural conversation back and forth as if you were working with a colleague versus like a software program. Was that helpful? Okay. Same thing, rewriting an email, like maybe you wrote something up and it's a little terse or it's filled with like jargon or something like that and you want it to be more empathetic, understanding, make more sense to like your target audience. You could put in the message, and this goes to like the point I was just saying, then you're giving it different sections of like, here's the draft I'm working on. Now here's the example that I've written before that I think works well. Now give me your response according to this information. And it's gonna like basically hit it out of the park on the first try versus like you going back and forth. You're still gonna need to like review it, make sure it sounds okay. You might change a few things out here and there, but it's going to get you to like 95% of the way there immediately versus like a lot of the back and forth that might take place. So meta prompting, this is one of my favorite techniques. I mentioned this before, where a lot of times you go to one of these tools and you're staring at a blank input and you're like, what do I do with this thing? And it just says like, how can I help you? Like, I don't know, how can you help me? Well, it turns out you can just ask that exact question. Like, this is where you work with the tool to say, hey, how can I help you, the tool, to help me better right out of the gate? It's a weird way to think about it, but it turns out that large language models, these general chat assistants, they're actually really good at understanding how to work with themselves, which is not something we've ever been accustomed to working with software. You can't, you're not used to opening up Excel and being like, hey, I need to write this function in this cell to like calculate whatever it is you're interested in, or write this report. How am I supposed to do that with you? You're not going to get an answer back, but you will get an answer back with a large language model, which is amazing. So a couple meta prompting ideas just to get the juices flowing a little bit. But if you were ever curious about where to go with it, you could just literally start the conversation by, hey, I'm thinking about working on this project in this context. What are ways that I can talk to you to help me get like a good response back? Or what are ways that I can talk to you to get the output that I'm hoping for? And it can be general, it can be conversational. You could pretend you're talking to me as someone that like generally knows how to work with these tools, but then just put that into the prompt. And it can even be sort of, you could say things like, I don't really know how to frame this, or I don't know the right words to use. Can you help me like brainstorm some ways to work with you? And it'll do a great job at doing that. Another thing that you can do, let's say you're working on a piece of content and you start off maybe with a general prompt, you go back and forth, you get the formatting just right, and by the end of it, it's starting to nail the work that you're trying to get done every single time. One suggestion I have, and I do this quite often, is I'll stop sort of like mid-conversation and like break the fourth wall, so to speak, and I'll be like, hey, great job, buddy, you're nailing it right now. How do we get here earlier on in the conversation? Like, how do I get you to give me this type of response right out of the gate? And it'll happily tell you, like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's work through how we do this together. And then you can copy and paste that and save that for like system prompt in the future, which, in case you're not aware, a system prompt is just like a reusable prompt that you can copy and paste in the first part of a conversation. Or with tools like Google Gemini or paid versions of some of the other tools, they have ways that you can create custom assistants that you can insert instructions on for every single conversation. So you just paste that in, and then you don't have to like redo this entire process every time. It's loaded up, ready to work with you right out of the gate, which is really nice. These are just extra examples, more stuff that I just went through. All of this sort of ties back to, so Anthropic is the company that creates Claude. One of my personal favorite chat assistants of choice. I don't know, for lack of a better way to phrase it, I kind of like the vibe of its output a little bit better. It's really intelligent, it's more personable, warm, stuff like that. But they have on their developer documentation, the first part of like prompt engineering and system prompting is something called the golden rule. And I think this all ties into like effective communication with these tools, where if you were to hand your prompt to, let's say, a colleague or a fellow student or a TA or something like that, to complete a task with little extra context other than just what is in that information you provided, would they be able to successfully complete that task? So you can keep that in the back of your mind when you're working on more advanced types of materials or projects that might require like multiple steps or things like that. Be like, how am I going to frame this so that I can give you the most information up front to help you with my request here? Which also ties into this is like another way to think of AI, even though it is software, we don't want to confuse the fact like this isn't human, this is just fulfilling a request, turning off at the end of each turn. It doesn't have like memory about that necessarily. But think about it more like a collaborative effort with a colleague or something. So a legal assistant, TA, a junior associate, new employee, stuff like that. They're super eager to help, but it does need to be brought up to speed with your goals and expectations, your personal context, and what you find meaningful or what you want to get done. Yeah. So getting towards the end here of wrapping up, but one thing to consider, just some like extra like food for thought, is getting the most out of AI. How are you going to get in like an AI first mindset or just an AI mindset in general? One thing to think about is AI tools really shine when they work alongside you. Like this is, again, a collaborative effort. This isn't just like offloading or outsourcing a task. Oftentimes, I mean, I'll spend a lot of time myself like curating and coming up with the proper content and context that I want to provide to it to do work that I'm trying to do. And for me, you know, I'm writing like informational blogs and how-tos for educational content and stuff like that. So like the stakes aren't that high for me. It's going to be a little bit different for you as practicing lawyers. So you just want to make sure that you're still in charge of like reviewing that material, being real careful and thoughtful on that front. But if you are like staying active behind the wheel, chances are you're going to reduce or eliminate those risks involved. Another tip that I often tell people if they're like, I don't know, AI doesn't really seem like it's for me, is to shift from that like seeking output mindset to seeking input on things. So maybe you've already got a draft or you already have like an outline for something that you want to work on. Well, you can put that in and get some feedback up front. You could say, hey, like, maybe you're in your job and you're like, am I missing like any stakeholders that should be brought into the process to help me like think through more ways to work on this? Am I missing any key components that I should be thinking about or adding to it to add benefit to whatever it is I'm working on? You could just get like some copy editing and like redlining tips for things like you would go to like a writing center for example. So shifting from that, where you're still the one, like the human judgment behind the wheel, doing some of the work, you're just getting that extra level of like sanity check or other experience, other points of views that might be helpful for certain things. And then ultimately, you know, don't overthink it and don't forget to have fun with it too. Like AI can be used for, like I am personally like an AI optimist. I understand there's a lot of risks and things like that involved as well. But there's also so many positive ways to use it, and part of that is having fun too. So don't feel like it has to be all work. You can goof around with it and, you know, write some funky poems to your friends or whatever and have fun. So real quick, like I said, we've got some additional resources that I want to provide to you in case you want to go even deeper. So the first one is that AI Foundations site. So if you didn't scan the QR code earlier, don't worry, I'm going to share the slides and the presentation after the fact. I came across this podcast last fall that's really helpful, actually. It's two women, they're practicing lawyers and educators in the legal space. It's called 2030 Vision. And they do roughly like a monthly podcast, but they always start with like stuff that's surprising them in the legal field, what the legal industry is thinking about it, and how they're using AI in their daily lives. So that might be useful just to check out. The last 4 videos is about 6 to 7 hours of deep dives into like the architecture underlying these tools. So again, I can safely say like if you spend some time with these things, you'll have more than enough competency and literacy in this area to serve you like in no matter what area that you want to apply AI, you'll be able to understand at a deeper level, like, again, like the pitfalls of it, when to look out for some of the sharp edges, but then also how to make it work alongside you in a much better and effective way. Whew. All right. I actually made it on time for once in my life. So I know that's basically 1 p.m., but happy to answer other questions that you all might have, if you have any. Yeah.
I'm wondering if, as you talked about, you can give the prompt context. Is there a way to like have my own personal database of stuff that I always want the model to be referencing, like for a particular project?
Yeah.
And just have that off to the side, like I'm working on X, reference this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends on the tool. So that's part of like the tools and capabilities side of things. Claude has something called projects. It's a paid feature. Same with ChatGPT. So like if I go in here, back in our little tariff area, and go down to projects, I could create a project, sure, birthday party planning, why not? Create the project, And then whatever I load into this as files and source material, it's going to reference that. It uses that basically as, it's called retrieval augmented generation. I didn't really touch on that term, but it grounds future conversations in that material. So it's smart enough to like make the relationships of the material you put in there. So when you ask a prompt or you're asking for help with something, it's like, oh yeah, I have this in my knowledge base. I'm going to go pull the relevant information to help you with the thing you're working on. So this is in ChatGPT. Claude has something similar. Google Gemini, which is also available to you for free. Do you guys know that you have access to Google Gemini with your BC account? Okay, well you do. It's actually, their latest models are fantastic. So 2.5 Pro experimental is what's called a reasoning model. It's more advanced. It'll probably help you more with like actual like legal analysis and reasoning. There's a study I didn't get a chance to like share with you all, but long story short, law school in Minnesota put a bunch of law students through this, and turns out working with AI gave them both efficiency and productivity improvements, like quality of their work, ranging from 30 to 140% on 6 different legal tasks. And it was because of things like retrieval augmented generation, grounding it in source material, and the new advent of reasoning models. Quick aside, but we also have access to this thing called GEMs. Goofy name, but that's what they call them. That's the same thing that projects are in ChatGPT and Claude. So this is where you go if you want to create a new gem. You can upload knowledge. It's also nice because you can tie it to things in your Google Drive. Yeah, which is great. So this is where you would give it like the custom instructions. So you work with the tool. You're like, hey, let's work on this thing together. Give me some instructions for how to work with you on this type of task moving forward. You paste those in here. You paste your knowledge or tie it to a Google Doc or whatever. Then each conversation is going to be loaded up with that moving forward. Thank you. Yeah. Cool. Thank you all. I want to be respectful of time so you can get to like where you need to go to. So, but I'm happy to stick around if you have other questions.